Hannah had no children, and for an Israelite woman to have no children was almost a disgrace. And besides, she wanted a child, and she had gone with her husband to the feast at the tabernacle, and she went into the tabernacle area and she began to pray. And she prayed so hard and so loud that Eli, the high priest who was nearby, thought she was drunk. And he corrected her. He said, "You shouldn't act like that, madam." And she said, "No, no, you don't understand. I'm praying." Oh, Eli said, "Well, I hope your prayer will be answered." Well, Hannah left, and she had promised God that if God would give her a son, that as soon as he was old enough to leave home and be away from her, she would bring him back and let him work for Eli and live in the tabernacle. Now, God hadn't asked her to do that, but that was Hannah's promise. And so God gave Hannah a child. And the next year she was pregnant, and she didn't go with her husband to the feast. And she didn't go the next year. In fact, probably close to 5 or 6 years went by. And Samuel, her little boy, was old enough now that he could leave home. And she made him lots of new clothes, and she packed them up, and back she went to the Feast of the Tabernacle. And when she got there, she went to Eli, and she said to the high priest, "You see, here's my little boy. God answered my prayer." And he recognized her and he said, "Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad." And she said, "I've brought him because he's going to live with you and work for you in the temple. And every year I will come back and bring him more clothes." Well, Eli was glad to have company. He had 2 older sons, but they were the pits. They were mean. They committed sins. They stole from the people. They were no good. And Eli did absolutely nothing to punish them or try to train them when they were little. He just let them be that way. And so he really didn't have any company. Well, Samuel was a good boy, and Samuel began to grow up. And one night Samuel was sound asleep in his bed, and he heard a voice. And he opened his eyes, and he listened, and the voice said, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel thought, "Okay, Eli's calling me." So he hopped out of bed, his feet hit the cold floor, and he ran into Eli's room, and he shook him because Eli was snoring away. He was a big fat fellow too, and he shook him, and Eli said, "Huh? What's the problem, Samuel? What do you want?" And Samuel said, "Well, you called me, sir." And he said, Nah, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. You're just having bad dreams." So Samuel went back to bed, and he pulled the covers up to here, and pretty soon he was asleep again, and he was sound asleep, and something went, "Shh, hey, shh, Samuel, wake up, Samuel." Samuel woke up, and he thought, "Oh, that's Eli again." And he jumped out of bed and ran into Eli's room, and he shook Eli again and said, "Yes, Eli, here I am. What is it?" And Eli said, "What are you doing up again? We're neither one getting a good night's rest. Did you have too much pizza for supper or what? Now just go back to bed. I didn't call you." So he went back to bed, and he crawled in bed, and about the time he was asleep, he heard the voice again, "Samuel, Samuel." And he jumped up and ran into Eli's room again, and Eli said, "I'm getting tired of this. I'm not getting any sleep at all, and neither are you. Now you go back to bed, son, and this time if anybody calls you, you say, 'Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth.'" And Samuel thought, "What? He thinks God's calling me? Oh, wow." Well, he went back and he pulled the covers up to here, and he lay there, and he couldn't go to sleep for a while, and then finally his eyes got really sleepy and tired, and he dozed off, and he heard something there. "Samuel, Samuel, speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth." And God said, "Samuel, I have a message for Eli. I want you to go tell Eli that his sons are no good, and he knows that, and there's no way that they can ever become the high priests. And you tell him that his sons are going to die, and they're not going to be the high priest." And Samuel thought, "Oh, I don't want to tell Eli that. I know his sons are rotten, but that's a terrible thing to have to tell a man." We got up the next morning, and he went in to have breakfast with Eli, and as they were sitting there, Eli said, "Well, son, we didn't get much sleep last night, did we?" No, sir. Did you hear the voice again? Yes, sir. I can't hear you, Samuel. Did you hear the voice again? Yes, sir. Well, aren't you going to tell me what it said? Well, it said, I can't hear you. Speak up, son. You know I'm getting old and deaf. Well, it was God, all right. You were right. And God said that you haven't been a very good disciplinarian of your sons, and they're no good, and they can't be the high priest, and they're going to die. And Eli said, well, God told you the truth. I know they're no good, and I know they can't ever be the high priests. Well, some time passed, and one day they had to go to battle against the Philistines again. And so the boys, the bad sons of Eli, decided that they would take the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred Ark of the Covenant, with Aaron's rod that budded and a jar of manna and the 10 Commandments in it, and they would take it out of the tabernacle and into battle, and that would scare the Philistines. Well, it did scare the Philistines. It made them decide that they were going to fight even harder than they had intended to. And in the middle of the battle, they stole the Ark of the Covenant. And they took it back to their own place. And when it was through and the word got back, both of the sons had been killed in battle. And somebody came back to tell old Eli what had happened. And he was leaning backwards against the wall in his chair. Big old fat Eli. And they came up to him and they said, well, the battle is over and we lost. Oh, that's a shame. And both of your sons are dead. Oh, no. But worse than that, the Philistines have stolen the Ark of the Covenant. And Eli went back too far and he fell over backwards and broke his neck. Now, Samuel is going to be the leader of the Israelites. And he's going to be an excellent leader. But because these boys, these young men, disobeyed God, the ark, at least temporarily, is gone. You need to accept and obey the discipline that your parents give you. Because if they discipline you, it means they love you. You see, Eli didn't love his boys enough to really make them behave themselves. And it ended in a sad situation for the boys, for Eli, and for the ark.